tasting video for our Single Cask Nation Foursquare 16-year-old. Joshua, it's nice to see you again. We're a few in at this point. We're in the same shirts. We're just a little less straight-spined. But we made a comment. Yeah, am I speaking for myself? We made a comment in our last tasting video for the Stones that I think is equally true for this Foursquare. This distillery is in huge demand. And I'm curious, we talked about the Orkney and why that checks boxes for people. Why do you think Foursquare checks so many boxes for people?
You know, rum is an interesting category for people to get into because it's easily the most diverse of all spirit categories. Full stop. Right?
Interesting.
You've got dozens of countries making a spirit all in their different styles, right? And different flavor profiles, and some are fruity and some are like super intense and some are earthy, and they distill in pots, they distill in columns, they use dunder pits. Like there's
Yeah.
so much going on, and it's almost an overload of information. Meanwhile, the biggest driver for the rum market is cheap and easy rum meant for mixing, right? For just fun, easy
Yeah.
cocktails.
Yeah.
And 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 so that's why I think it can be a difficult category to get into, because you say, "Oh, is it the cheap shit that goes into a cocktail?" Which is nothing wrong with that, right? Let's make a good rum cocktail. That's fine. But then what country do I go with? And do I like this? Do I like that? And I think one of the things about Foursquare, especially for the American market, is that the flavor profile of it really fits well with the bourbon palate. It really aligns itself with that bright sweetness going on. You've got the rum distillate that when in good wood really pulls out a lot of that fresh oak spice coming through,
Yeah.
which a lot of bourbon
Oak
and rye
spice for
drinkers
sure.
like.
Yeah.
And then, when I think of Foursquare specifically, and I get this note on this rum, is there's this cotton candy note that people quite often get with weeded bourbons. And
Okay.
what's everybody's favorite weeded bourbons? Right? It's the William LaRue Wellers, it's the Pappies, it's you know, all of these really high-end bourbons that are highly sought after. And then you
Mm.
find that note in a rum, an affordable rum at that, and you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna do that." So
Oh, that's
that's
good.
why I think.
That's good.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like that answer.
yeah. Thank you, I'm here all week. Tip your server.
I will also say this distillery also puts out a cocktail mixer bottling.
Yeah.
It's just not the single cask strength Foursquare offerings, which,
Yeah,
if you listen to One Nation Under Whiskey, you know what Jason's making cocktails with.
and speaking of One Nation Under Whiskey, I think it's good to point out that we actually had an interview with Richard Seal, who owns Foursquare. Like, this is his baby,
Yeah.
Richard and Gail. And so we interviewed him on the podcast, and I'll put the link in the YouTube page here. So if there's anybody who hasn't listened into that, it was a really, really intriguing conversation, and he's just a hell of a guy to listen to and to talk with.
It is interesting, though, because when you and I started our journey, I wasn't a rum guy, nor was I a mezcal or tequila guy. I was a Scotch guy. And Foursquare sits so well on my palate. And I think of those warm brown sugar notes. I
Mm.
think of the toasted oak, and you were mentioning oak spice. I think about those warm apple pie notes, the vanilla ice cream notes. And I think those are very familiar to
Mm.
my Scottish palate. The one thing that always captures my attention when it comes to rum, and where it definitely moves away from my more familiar palate, is that kind of bright estery note. And we
Mhm.
talked about this the other week when we sat down with Ari Clafter and we talked about our Thornton rum. And we talked about esters and ester production.
Mhm.
And clearly not something you're getting in Scotch whiskey. And so as much as I've got all these familiar notes,
Mhm.
my palate is always reminded, my nose and my palate are always reminded that this is a different spirit. And
Yeah.
that and I like that. I like that familiarity. I like recognizing the step that it takes
Mm.
to move from single malt to rum, but then enjoying everything when I get there.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I notice when drinking this rum is the bottle.
Oh yeah. Hello. Welcome, Foursquare 16-year-old. How you doing? Forgot you were in the green room.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the spirit really took well to the oak, and after 16 years of being in oak in Barbados, right? In the climate that it was in, it's nice to know that the oak didn't completely overtake the spirit. I think it plays really well. You get this sort of like cinnamon spice and brown sugar going on. You get this fruitiness, but it's like a raisiny fruitiness coming through. The nose, I keep coming back to the nose and I get this like apple pie, little vanilla ice cream going on. And again, a little bit of that cotton candy there as well.
As I sit with this, it sips neat, beautifully. 54.8% alcohol, very
Mhm,
accessible.
mhm.
16 years in refill bourbon hogshead, very accessible. It's quite drying. My
Mm.
gums are getting dry. Inside the cheeks are getting a little
Yeah.
dry. But just like in a good scotch, when that happens, it makes me want to take another sip. And
Mm.
to me, that's what can make a good sipper
Yeah.
is when it's rich, it's unctuous, it's juicy, it's sweet. And then it starts to dry, right? Then
Yeah.
a little bit of that cinnamon just kind of tells
Mm.
its story.
Mhm.
And then you take another sip, right? Because you want the liquid. Oh,
Yeah. I think it's important to point out, 99 times out of 100, you and I are bottling everything at full cask strength. When it comes to rum, however, especially rum that's been maturing in its place of origin, we don't always do that because we'll get samples that are 72%, 75% alcohol. And that drying aspect that you're talking about is like on steroids.
yeah.
And so with this Foursquare and with a few of the other rums we've released, we brought it down to an ABV that we thought had it at the proper drinking strength. And at 54.8, for me, it tamed the wood down like you're talking about, where you get a pleasant drying quality with
Mm,
none of the astringency. The fruit is intact, the oak is intact, that those sort of chocolatey notes all intact and in harmony at 54.8. Like this is just the perfect drinking strength.
yeah. Yeah. Distilled April 2007, bottled October 23, one of 251 bottles.
Jason, on the
I was going to throw
finish,
something else. Yep. Here it
I
comes.
got some nice Manuka honey going on.
Yay!
Oh, that Manuka honey note, that rich, heavy kind of honey. Man, do I love that.
It's so good. It's
Yeah.
really so good.
Yeah.
You and I in selecting cast, what's one of the things we say? Would we reach for this?
Hmm.
Would we share this?
Hmm.
Yes, I would reach for it. Yes, I would share it. And I'd stick this in a cocktail for funsies. Not every time. Not every time. But for funsies, when I've been a good boy and I want a different
Oh, so you
experience.
never put it in a cocktail because you're never a good boy.
Oh,
You're
you
always a
naughty
naughty boy.
man. You naughty, naughty man.
No, I'm with you. You said it in a previous episode of the podcast. Good ingredients make for good cocktails. So there you go. So listen, again, this is being released Thursday, April 18th at noon Eastern, along with two other bottlings. Um, This is $140 a bottle. And how many bottles did you say we had? I can't
251.
read the label. 251 bottles. So grab it while you can. This one, I have a feeling, is going to move. Think about rum drinking as the weather gets warmer. I know that's when I start pulling out my rum bottles. So I think this one's going to tick a lot of boxes for a lot of people.
Well, if you're a rum person, if you've got rum friends coming over and you've got Foursquare and you can show them Thornton, right? Foursquare's the home run, right? Foursquare's the easy peasy. What do we call it? The Port Ellen of rum, right? It's the one on everybody's lips. And the Thornton, you could turn some rum friends onto a different rum as well at the same time. That's always fun, right? It worked for Kilhoman for years. You ever heard of this Scotch distillery? It's called Kilhoman. Can't buy the stuff now. That's a conversation for another day.
Indeed.
Pick up your Foursquares, pick up your Thorntons, enjoy your rums, throw them into cocktails, have some fun. Cheers.
Cheers.